Hi everybody, Joe Malarkey with you, Malarkey 365. So last week we talked about Defender in general. We talked about the features that come with the Defender, the four pillars: Defender for Endpoint, the CASB, Defender for Cloud App Security, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, sorry. We talked about the Defender for Office 365, which is the email. And we also talked a little bit about Defender for Identity and the different licensing. So this week, we're going to hit one of those, Defender for Endpoint. That's the first one everyone thinks about, right? So we're going to start actually talking about the specific part of Defender for Endpoint, the number one thing that everyone thinks of, and that's the antivirus and how we configure that to actually work with Defender for Endpoint. So we'll talk briefly about Defender for Endpoint and then about configuring that antivirus. Okay, so how do we get all of the stuff working on the device so that we can have some control over our Defender for Endpoint, how it works, how it detects, how we manage the devices? Well, a few things that we have to do. First of all, we have to get Intune or some other management system involved. We're going to assume that it's Intune, though, because Intune is how we manage Windows devices, Mac devices, Linux, whatever. We're going to talk about Windows first. We need to actually tell the devices what to do. And when we talk about Defender for Endpoint, we're really talking about two main things that we're trying to tell the devices. Number one, we're going to tell the antivirus on the devices how to work. Right? Windows Defender specifically. Now you could have other antivirus on a Windows device, and you can onboard those machines to Defender for Endpoint. You could do that. However, you lose a lot of functionality with Defender for Endpoint if you use another antivirus. You lose the network protection that we'll talk a little bit about next week. That's kind of the non-Microsoft Edge versions of Smart Screen using custom indicators like URLs or FQDNs, I should say, that you don't want people going to, or using categories like gambling or new domains that you don't want people going to. Smart Screen is the component in Edge that takes care of that. Network protection does it in all the other browsers and apps. Well, network protection, that is actually part of Windows Defender, the antivirus on the machine. So if you use someone else's antivirus, that is unconfigurable. It won't work. Also, the ASR rules that we'll talk about later, attack surface reduction, another component of the devices, those don't work. So you lose a good amount of functionality if you use someone else's antivirus. Now, presumably, hopefully, those other antiviruses, they come with this functionality, or they have something else you can buy for that functionality. But Windows Defender has it as part of the antivirus. So that's why we like using Windows Defender. So the first thing we got to do is tell Windows Defender how to work. When does it do a quick scan? Does it do quick scans? Does it do full scans? How often does it update itself? Does it send stuff up to the cloud? Is automatic protection involved? Is it scan network drives? All these kinds of things, we want to send it down through Intune, through a configuration profile. So that's what we'll take a look at today, and how you configure that. Now, of course, we're also through Intune going to tell it to onboard itself to Defender for Endpoint so that we can start managing them from the cloud and keeping things rolling from the cloud and working with and seeing all the alerts that the antivirus and everything else picks up from the device in the cloud. So we'll talk about that too, but let's start just talking about the antivirus and how you configure that. So let's go do that. Okay, here we are in the Intune portal, and all we're going to do today is just tell the Windows Defender antivirus on the devices how to work. Now, if you're familiar with Intune, you know there's like 3 or 4 or more ways to do the exact same thing. It's a bit of a frustrating part of Intune. There is a reason why Microsoft does it that way. They start out with one way to do things, then they try and make it easier. And once you do that or more functional, well, you can't get rid of the old way, so the old way sticks around. So, pretty soon you pile up a bunch of ways to do it. So there's a couple of ways to set antivirus to work in Intune. You can create a configuration profile. You can create a profile. It's just from the catalog, settings catalog, where you pick and choose the settings you want. And then there's a third way, which I think is the best way. And this way is to go and create an endpoint security policy, because there's an antivirus one in there that has all the settings really that we need. So that's what we're going to do. On the left here, I'm going to click on endpoint security. And you can see right in the middle, I see manage antivirus, disk encryption, which of course is BitLocker, the firewall, which we should definitely be turning on. We'll do a video on that in this series. Endpoint privilege, we don't want to do that one. That's an extra paid service. Endpoint detection and response, we want to do that one. Not today, but later. That's how we onboard machines into the Defender for Endpoint cloud. So all these things, including attack surface reduction, Microsoft, you can do all of these a different way, but they're right here. They have the settings that we want, so these actually are the best way to do all of these things, I think. So I'm going to click on antivirus. We'll start there, and I'm going to tell it I want to create, you can see I have a couple of test ones in here, actually for Macintosh, which we will talk about that as well. I'm going to create a Windows profile and look at my choices here. How a Defender update controls, Defender antivirus exclusions. That's a separate thing. Defender antivirus, and then security experience. Well, Windows Defender antivirus is the one we're going to choose. There's some exclusion inside of there. They a little while back, they created this extra exclusions one just so you could have another policy for exclusions. And that way you could target the exclusions at different groups of devices, right? So maybe the development team keeps getting hit by a bunch of stuff that normally we would be worried about. So maybe we make an exclusion for them. So instead of creating a separate antivirus policies for all those places, we create one antivirus policy. Everybody gets the same setting, and then we can control the exclusions for different groups. So that's one reason why you would have a separate one of those. Security experience, that's the Windows Security Center. And what the user's general experience is on that. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So let's get into Windows Defender Antivirus. Oh, and I've prevented myself from clicking on that create button. Let me remove my face around here for a minute. So what should we call this? I like to call all the Defender for Endpoint related policies, I like just to say, start out with a MDE. And then a dash, and then whatever it's going to be. I'm going to call this one Antimalware and Network Protection, if you can spell that. Why did I throw network protection in here? I just mentioned it a minute ago, and I did mention that it's part of the Defender antivirus. And I did say we would do a separate video on this and a few other things. Well, again, there's a bunch of places I could turn network protection on. And I vacillated back and forth. Where should I turn that on? Should I make it a whole separate policy? And to me, that doesn't make sense. It is part of the antivirus, so I just decided I'm just going to put it in here whenever I create one of these policies for one of my customers. So it's just a quick checkbox, and then we're done. Configuring network protection is part of configuring the web content filtering and indicators of compromise. So we'll take care of that later. But for this one, I'm just gonna when we get into the policy, you'll see it's just one quick setting. All right. So here's all of our settings. Look at all these settings as I scroll down. There's quite a bit of stuff. Here's our excluded extensions, excluded path, excluded processes. We'll talk about, again, there's another way to do exclusions. I'll mention exclusions as we're doing this. a couple of gotchas that I always like to point out. Don't use exclusions if you can't help it. If you're going from a different antivirus to Windows Defender, don't automatically bring over your exclusions. Number one, there's probably a bunch of junk in there you shouldn't have because for expeditious reasons, somebody threw an exclusion in there and forgot all about it. I've seen plenty of exclusionless Defender or otherwise that have entire folders that are easily accessible by attackers if they get any kind of a foothold on the machine, excluded from this. And all the attacker has to do is pop a file or a script inside of those folders, and they're excluded. So don't bring any over. See what happens in your pilot. Expand the pilot when you find something. You can create an exclusion then. But a lot of third-party exclusions aren't even necessary in Defender, and probably vice versa. So just stick without any. Now we'll talk about that a little bit. So bunch of other settings in here. At the bottom, we get a bunch of things we're not going to really change, but you can see there's quite a bit to do here. So I'll try and emphasize the super important stuff. So from top to bottom, allow archive scanning. Well, when you click on the down arrow for any of these, it tells you what the default is. All right. I like to go ahead and choose something anyway if it's an important setting. So yeah, scanning archive files, zips and whatnot. We definitely want to allow that. Allow behavior monitoring. Yep, we definitely want to have that turned on. So let's just turn that on by default. Could it get turned off by something? We could screw up. We could have another Intune policy that says not configured that turns it on. Maybe want to turn it off. We could have someone on the local machine as an administrator making settings that could get merged with these settings. So I always like to be specific so I know it's turned on here. So if there's an issue, I know it's not here. I got to go looking somewhere else. We'll talk about local administrators and their ability to screw this up. We can prevent that. Don't worry. We'll talk about that. There's tamper protection and there's something called admin merge. We can use those in combination to keep people on the local machine from trying to get around our Antimalware, antivirus. Allow cloud protection. Super important. This is what allows Windows Defender to work with the cloud, to upload files so they get detonated in the cloud so we can see if anything's wrong. And then the device can be told, hey, don't let the user open up that file. That thing did something weird. So definitely that's a super important one. Allow email scanning. Not so important. And on all of these, you can actually get a pretty good amount of information by just clicking on the little eyeball. Well, sometimes you get a lot of information, maybe not this one, but if you click on Learn More and you kind of open it in a new tab, most of them go to this policy CSP. Some of them go right to what you want. Some of them you got to search for it. So I'll do a quick thing here. Oops. Do a quick find. Email. I misspelled that. Hold on. All right, this is it. And you look down at this thing. Was this it? Yeah, I think maybe I went down too far. Email 2, I clicked on the wrong one. Well, what email does is it lets you turn on scanning of some email databases on the machine, like a PST file. It doesn't really do anything for modern clients like Outlook with its synced file from your Exchange Online, and we assume Exchange Online is doing its work up there. So the bottom line is email here. You can turn it on. You might still have these older clients. Or older, not clients, but, clients, yeah, but older formats that you're using. Not really super worried about email scanning. Allow full scan on map network drives. Well, if you do a full scan, do we want map network drives fully scanned. That's up to you. Most companies these days aren't even using mapped drives because most of the devices are cloud-based. So you can see it's not allowed by default. Yeah, it takes a while to do that. And also, we shy away from doing full scans anyway. Right? But if I tell a machine to do a full scan and that's enabled, well, it's going to try and connect to those map network drives and do full scans on them. Could take quite a while. So that one's up to you. I probably would not do it. I would rely on my file server antivirus to do the scanning on those machines. Allow a full scan for removable drive. Well, yeah, that one I like. If I'm doing a full scan and you have a thumb drive or something else on the machine, yeah, why not scan that as well? If you're doing a full scan, I keep saying that, right? Well, today we just like to do quick scans. Full scans, yeah, we do them once in a while, but for the most part, the active protection and with the maybe weekly quick scan of the places where virus could pop in is probably good enough for us, right? And that's Microsoft recommends it. They don't recommend full scans anymore. All right. We're not going to do any intrusion prevention. That's deprecated anyway. That'll disappear. Allow scanning of all downloaded files and attachments. Yeah, that's a good idea. Allow real-time monitoring. Another important one. We definitely want that on. All right, that's the thing that's looking at anything coming into the machine. So definitely that's an important one. Allow scanning network files, similar to the full scanning of mapped drives, but just this is any way you get to a network file, // So yeah, you can do that. You can, again, you can turn on again these network drives, though, these network file shares, they should be protected by the server. So again, I'm going to kind of leave that one off, not configured. Allow user UI access, up to you. Again, we can lock the user out of making changes and still allow them to see things. So allowed is not a bad idea. We don't care. I don't care much of what they see. I might not want them to see exclusions and know what I'm excluding, but I can actually take care of that another place. There's actually a setting that prevents administrators or regular users from enumerating the exclusions, because you can think that's actually a potentially dangerous thing. If I'm telling people what I'm excluding, now they have one less thing to try and figure out. All right. So, but we'll talk about another way to do that, but that's one of the things they could see with that. CPU load factor, max archive depth and size. I leave these not configured. I'm going to let Microsoft figure out the best way to do that. They modify those settings from time to time. Check for signatures. I like to do that, even though the Defender should be getting updated regularly. I just like to check for signatures before, just so the antivirus engine itself can work a lot faster. Now, if we have cloud protection turned on, which we did turn on, and we'll get a little bit more into the settings here in a second. If Windows sees a file and it can't figure out whether it's good or not, it will send it up to the cloud to have it detonated, and then it'll come back. But I would prefer to keep these signatures as up to date as possible so that they get caught immediately right on the device and save a lot of time that way. So I like to put that setting on. Block level, very important here that we want to turn this on, and I like to set it at high. This is actually Microsoft's default, or their recommendation, and it's weird they put the word default in there. They're not super clear on what that is. I would say turn this on to high. It's a good amount of protection without being overly protective. This is just how often it's going to stop a file that it's unsure of and send it to the cloud. High is good. We'll just stick with that. In a super secure environment, if you have total control over the devices, very few ways that people doing stuff on them, maybe you go super high. But I think high is the good standard to go with. That's Microsoft standard as well. When it does that, when it stops and says, I don't know about this file, and it makes a decision based on that cloud block level to send it up to Defender in the cloud. How long does it wait before it gets an answer back? Well, the default is 10 seconds. Probably not enough time. So can you add to that? Yep, you sure can. It's right here, and it recommended that you do that. You add another 50 seconds to it to make the total a minute. Okay? That's the Microsoft recommendation. That's how big it can go right now. That may change in the future. Recommendation, but that's what we want to set it at right now. Days to retain clean malware. The default here is 0. It just tells it, well, if we find malware, we're going to quarantine it, and we're going to just keep it forever. Now, a lot of companies like to do that so they can go back and look at something, however long in the past it was detected. But you can set that to whatever you want. 90 days is fine. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Disable catch-up quick scan. Quick scan and full scan. If you have scheduled full scans, which you shouldn't have, okay? If it misses one of those because the device is off, here you can tell it, well, let's not do a catch-up one, because if it misses twice, then it's going to try and catch it up right when the machine starts, and it might slow it down. This is one of those weird settings that you get in group policies and Intune and other Microsoft places. That kind of works with a double negative language, and some of you know immediately what I mean when I say that. We disable the disabling, or we enable the disabling is the weird thing here. So disable catch-up full scan. If we enable that, that means we're doing what it says. We are disabling the catch-up full scan. So we're not going to tell it not to do that. That's fine. I'm not going to do any full scans anyway. Disable catch-up quick scan. Well, this one, I will disable the disabling. And again, this is one of those times when you click on the I, it actually does go through the list. And if we look in the bottom, where's this at? If you disable this, catch-up scans will be, if you disable or do not configure this setting, catch-up scans will be turned off. So yeah, I'm pausing here because there's different language, and I'm just noticing this now. So let's all learn together. If I click on the top one, catch up a full scan, I look down. It says, if you enable this setting, catch-up scans will be disabled. That's what I said. Enabling this does what it says it's going to do. Okay? It will do the disabling of the full catch-up full scan. Now, if there was no scheduled full scan, this setting will be completely ignored. This is only for scheduled scans. All right, we do like the scheduled quick scan, so let's click on this one, and you'll see, this is why I stopped 2 seconds ago. I guess I've never read this to this second one. If you disable, the other one said if you enable. If you disable or don't configure this, catch-up scans will be turned off. Now, that's saying the opposite. I think whoever wrote this got a little confused. If I switch over to the disable catch-up quick scan, this is the behind the scenes documentation. This is correct. If you disable or don't configure this, catch-up scans will be turned on. So if you disable the disabling, they'll be turned on. It's super confusing, I know. But if you enable this setting, it does what it says it's going to do. Okay, that's all we really want to remember. So if we enabled it, quick scans wouldn't work, would be turned off. All right, this is correct. Going back to this one, this says the opposite. Okay, just a weird documentation with this pop-up screen here. But you'll see it's enabled by default, which means catch-up quick scans will be turned off. They will be disabled. Right? So what I like to do is disable that disabling. Fair enough? Okay. Now, hopefully quick scans, aren't going to be going to have to do too much catch up, and if we're really concerned with it, we can make the quick scan happen sometime during the day. Well, whatever. We'll just disable this. Enable low CPU. Nah. Enable network protection. Remember I told you there was going to be a one quick setting here? Yeah, we're going to actually turn that on. Now you notice there's block and audit mode. We're going to turn on and block mode. Audit mode means, well, now we got to go see if it would have got caught. I just like turning this thing on. It's going to really do the same thing that Smart Screen does, only it's not going to be as fancy in most browsers with the red thing saying, you're blocked from this. You'll get a little thing in the lower right-hand corner saying your organization blocked this site. And they got some weird, error in the middle of the screen. So we want to block those, right? If people start getting blocked on stuff, we can revisit that and we can make exclusions or whatever. We'll talk about that later. Here's our excluded stuff. Excluded extensions. Ooh, I want to stay away from that. That's like file extensions. Excluded paths. I would stay away from this as well. This is whole folders or files that we want to exclude. So if I wanted to exclude some executable, I would do it under paths. Here's excluded processes. What about that? Isn't an executable a process? Sure is. But what this means is something completely different. All right. What this means is I'm going to add the process here, executable, but I'm not telling it with what I'm pointing at right now. I'm not telling it to exclude that executable. What I'm telling it is to exclude anything that executable touches. Much more powerful. Okay, so be very careful when you choose excluded process. If you're going to exclude something, the traditional exclusion that we think of is really excluded paths. All right, moving on. PUA. Well, this is another thing we'll talk about later. This is telling Defender don't allow questionable applications from the web to be installed in the user context. Yeah, potentially unwanted applications. It's a good thing. A lot of miners, crypto miners and stuff. It's a good thing to have turned on. You can turn this one in audit mode, and you can you have to go to the machine and see what's happening. So this one could cause you some angst. At least turn on in audit mode. If you're going to use it at all. It's a pain in the neck for a lot of companies because a lot of companies do happen to just go to places that where these potentially unwanted apps are. So it's up to you. I started in audit mode, but then again, you got to go to the device. You got to look in the audit logs there and see what it would have broke or what it wouldn't have allowed. Real-time scan direction, leave this alone. This is for, do you want outgoing files or incoming files, for instance, to be scanned? Sometimes on servers, you want to change that based on the server load, but for workstations, we want to leave that alone. It's going to be inside. It's going to be both directions. And then scan parameter. If we set up a scheduled scan, which I'm going to do here, do we want it to be a quick or full? Quick is what we want. I'm going to schedule this. 1:20 is the default. That means 2 in the morning. It's just midnight plus 60 minutes would be 1, plus 120 minutes would be 2 o'clock, 2 a.m. You get the idea. So we'll leave that. Scan day, do you want to set a day for this, or every day is a default? Right? I'll just choose every day. I like it to happen every day if it can. That way, if it does miss one and maybe the next day it's turned on, that's where that, did I miss 2 of those quick scans? Then it happens right when the user turns the machine back on. That was that previous setting. But if we tell it to do a quick scan every day, odds are, for most companies, for most machines, they're going to be on sooner or later at that time. All right. We're not going to do that one on the days. Signatures, signature updates, sources. If we don't want to do that, it's just going to get it right from the internet. All right. Update interval. Well, this is how often it by default just updates its signatures. I like to set this to 1 to 2 hours. It shouldn't cause a lot of network issues. So that's why I set it at 1, just so it's constantly doing it. It just makes everything happen faster when scans do start. Samples, another super important one. I choose send all samples. This is when it sends stuff up to the cloud. Can't make a decision, and we have our cloud protection turned on. We got our level set to high. So Microsoft Windows Defender can't figure something out. It's going to send it to the cloud to get detonated. That's what this is really talking about. And so what's this other stuff here? Prompt, send safe samples, send all samples. Well, I always choose send all samples. In a heavily regulated industry where we're not supposed to ever, for instance, send something that might be personal information up to the cloud because that will break some regulatory rule, then we might choose this one, send safe samples, because that's Microsoft looking at a file and making a judgment call. Well, it doesn't look like this is the kind of file that would have personal information in it. That's really what this is. Okay, so unless that's a super onerous regulation that your company has to follow, and you can't ever make a mistake of sending something personal outside of the company, you could choose that. But almost all cases, I don't really ever run into that particular one, so I choose send all samples. Don't let the user choose what to send either. Prompt, I would never do that. Send all samples automatically. Disable local admin merge. This is where the local administrator on the machine could create exclusions, for instance, or do something else. We probably want to disable that because we don't want them screwing around. Now, if they need to do something in a hurry, we can temporarily create a safe way for them to do that. Or we can just upload the exclusions generically. But having admins, giving them the ability to do that's usually a bad idea. All right. And then allow on-access protection. Of course, we want that to happen. It just anything that is accessed or used or whatever, we want that stuff looked at. Okay. The rest of this stuff at the bottom here, I leave alone. Okay, I'm just going to figure Microsoft knows best when it comes to all this stuff. Like, what does it do for high severity threats, severe threats, low threats? They're going to quarantine or delete the file. I think quarantine is the default for most of this. In fact, you can go through the list, and I think it tells you, maybe not there, but somewhere. But I would just leave it alone. All right, Microsoft knows pretty good what it should do. All right. And I'm not going to allow any network protection down level or anything else here. I'm just going to leave all these alone. All right. So I'll click on next. I'm not going to choose any scopes. I'm going to choose an assignment. In this case, I'll assign it later. All right. And I'll just save it. Okay. So that's pretty much it. That's how we tell the device how to use Antimalware. Okay. So, Let's bring it back home and just review it real quick. Okay, so we've told the Windows Antivirus Defender for Windows what to do and how to act. Do we do this after we onboard it, or should we do something else first? I like to just get this out of the way and tell Defender what to do. Even if there is another antivirus that you're using and maybe you're going to switch to Windows Defender, I would tell it this anyway. It's not going to change how anything works. If you have another antivirus that's registered itself on a device with the Security Center, then normally Windows Defender on the device will just be disabled and won't be working at all. We can still tell it what to do once it becomes active. Okay, so I would say go ahead and do this ahead of time. Then you can onboard the device. Or you could onboard it and then do it later, but don't worry about putting the cart before the horse here. Doesn't really matter. Speaking of other antiviruses on the machine, if you do have another antivirus on the machine, when we talk about onboarding Defender or onboarding Windows devices to Defender for Endpoint, we can onboard devices. We can do that with devices that have a different antivirus. And what we'll actually do is tell Windows Defender to switch into passive mode with something called ERD and block mode. Okay? That just tells it, well, sit back, don't be the primary one, don't do on access protection, don't do any of that stuff. But once in a while, take a look, see if you can find something. That's pretty much what passive mode is, and we can see your devices in passive mode in the portal and through KQL queries, and we'll talk about that when we get into configuring Defender for endpoint and onboarding devices. So that'll take care of it for this week. That's how you configure Windows Defender, the Antimalware on the device using Intune. All right, everybody, stay safe out there. I'll see you next week.